This segment is going to be somewhat of a follow-up to the first segment that I did on Friday, where we were joined by Freya India, and we were talking about young women being terrified of marriage, because it relates to a lot of the information that I brought up there. And it relates specifically to the idea of our beautiful, trusted experts. In the technocracy that we live in currently, a lot of prestige and a lot of reverence is directed towards those that are deemed by our leaders as being experts, that being that they have impressive technical knowledge which they have gained through going through the institutions, academic or otherwise, that grant them some kind of certificate.
Let me ask you.
That says that you are the best at thinking about or knowing about these things.
Does being an expert now mean that you say something that is convenient to the government, for the government?
Yes.
Okay.
Typically speaking, yes.
Okay. I was just asking.
We all know that in the
just checking to see if I live on another planet.
No, you live on planet Earth, sadly. Elon, get us to Mars already, for God's sakes. I want to get away from all this. The experts, they have to go through the academies, and we know that the academies are slanted very much in one direction politically, certainly with social issues, and also with economic and other issues as well. But the fact of the matter is, we can't trust the experts, not just because of the fact that they are all politically biased, but also because when they try to flex their expertise, it turns out that they're rubbish at it, that they are terrible at the things that they are supposedly expert at. And this will be an excellent example, an excellent exercise in exemplifying how.
Let me just say this, that it's marvelous to watch, because when you have an academia, let's say, or the place where the experts are supposed to be, of people who cannot engage in dialogue because they think the dialogue is offensive, then they lose their ability to argue for particular views, and it's just sad after a while.
Oh, that's sad, but it is wonderful to see that they are even terrible at doing that. It turns out, in the back-patting exercise that is modern academia, they can't even succeed at that. They end up reaching around so far that they slap themselves in the face while trying to pat themselves on the back. But before I go any further, let's look at some of the content, some of the videos that we have on the website. Josh, as always, very, very consistent with his contemplation series. This was one that he was expecting to be a lot more fun than it turned out to be, from what he told me. So you were involved in this.
I heard the exact opposite. It was way more fun.
Oh, really? Because he's talking about cults here. And he was telling me in the office that he was expecting cults to be something that would just be a little bit of fun. Let's look into some of the silly cults and see the silly things that certain small groups of people believe. And he found it a lot more depressing or a lot more revealing than he initially intended it to.
Just,
how was this? You were in this video.
Yeah, Tell me this is just a marvelous video. And we're talking about cults that worship cargo. I mean, how more Mad Max can you get? Where
they actually worship
they glorify
cargo.
V8. Yeah.
Wait, cargo as in what's in cargo?
Cargo as in cargo.
Or just like the big cargo shipments and the cargo containers.
Just watch it.
All right, okay.
It's marvelous.
I mean, to be fair, I've found that there's a weird new aesthetic emerging in British cities. Have you seen this as well? Last time I was in Manchester, in the Manchester Square, in the middle of the city centre, where there still are the fountains, there used to be a big Ferris wheel there. Now they have this weird load of cargo shipment containers that have been placed in such a way that they can add pubs and such into it. And
it's a form of inclusivity. You have people who worship cargo. You need to have cargo so they feel that they're welcome.
I suppose the people are coming over on the boats when they get into the cities. They want to retain that feeling of still being in the shipping container. I imagine that must be what it is. But if you subscribe to the website, £5 a month, then you'll be able to watch this as well as the entire back catalogue that Josh has on Contemplations and everything else that we have. So it's really worth checking out.
V8. That's all I'm going to say.
V8. All right. Well, if you want to find out more, then you'll have to subscribe, because that's somewhat, just a little bit, cryptic. Anyway, on to the segment. So the segment on Friday was talking mainly about this particular video that I had commented on, and then extrapolating from that some of the things that was going on. This video where it's, I'm being presented with a wedding ring, but oh no, if I do that, the only thing that will happen is all of these terrible things like washing and cleaning. There's nothing meaningful that emerges from it.
She's throwing it at Mount Doom.
She really is. She's going to throw that ring into the fires and vanquish Sauron i.e. the patriarchy, once and for all. There was something funny about this video because I took it, as many others did, on face value originally, but there was something that I hadn't noticed about this that some eagle-eyed viewers had, which is, do you notice the backdrop?
Yeah.
Do you notice the appliances and also the language on some of the things that she's folding, some of the clothes that she's folding?
I'm seeing one thing. Almost everything she's cleaning is already clean.
No.
If you see, okay, she's cleaning the plates. But
you're right, she's doing an excellent job.
Here, for instance, she's doing the bath. The bath is clean. Okay?
You're right, she's doing an excellent job.
Yeah.
I agree with you there.
The living room, not so much, and the kitchen needs some doing. Maybe,
but there is something a little bit off about the environment. Does this look like a typical Western environment to you from your travels across Europe? Does this look like the kind of architecture and style of appliances and bowls and other such things that you typically find in Europe or America?
Do not, but if you're talking about the country, I think you could say that it does belong to the Western camp in a cultural sense.
Perhaps. People started to point out that she's living in a house with marble walls, Asian dragon art. She's pouring oil from a bottle with Chinese characters into a wok in a kitchen with green plastic cabinets and bars on the windows. Something seems fishy with this. And just for a better look at this, see here, this person is suggesting that this is Chinese networked warfare. I have seen some people suggesting that they got a Chinese woman and used AI to make her look like a blonde white girl. I would say it's not very difficult for people from the West to go over to China and act in various media campaigns and make a bit of money off it. There's a number of examples of social media stars who've gone over to basically take part in Chinese psyops and propaganda for their own citizens over there. So that's not unusual. But this does appear to be some kind of grand psyop that the Chinese are pulling over here, because we know TikTok is a Chinese-owned app. Therefore, the Chinese Communist Party will probably have an insider idea of how the algorithm works. Therefore, they'll be able to push particular content that they want into the public's eye easier than it would just come up naturally from the bottom up. So they want this. They want this. So you can see there's the background. Looks pretty Chinese. Chinese characters, Chinese bowls, Chinese characters on the shirt, everything's very Chinese people in the background. So unless this was filmed very locally in some kind of little Chinatown that you get in some Western cities, this appears to have originated from China and being pushed by China. That's not to say that this kind of antenatal attitude isn't something that's also over here in the West, but it doesn't help when you have foreign powers also pushing it, because realistically speaking, they know whether or not there are issues that come with marriage and such things, that it is a pro-social thing. If you want a civilization to survive and to be as strong as possible, you want it to be unified, and you want it to be unified within families. China doesn't want that because they're our geopolitical enemy, and that's all of the West. And so therefore, they're going to do stuff like this. So that was something to point out first as well, just because it was very interesting that this got spotted by a lot of people. Either way, if I move on, a lot of people in response to mine, as I covered on Friday, were sending me articles like this saying, well, actually, the experts say that women are much happier when they're unmarried. And I want to highlight some of the text that I went over in here. And I'll just read it out so I can remind everybody who may have missed on Friday. Paul Dolan, a professor of behavioral science at the London School of Economics, one of our vaunted experts. I pray at the spirit of the experts. I make sure to give all of my sacrifices to them. I throw in my peer-reviewed studies into the fire to make sure that they are well nourished.
I mean, LSE, Hayek was there. Imagine the kind of downfall.
Oh, yeah. When you go from Hayek to Paul Dolan, professor of behavioral science, and also, I think the official term was expert of happiness expert, because we can now quantify this. He said that while men benefit from being married, women generally don't. The main evidence that he put forward was that he stated married people are happier than any other population subgroups, but only when their spouse is in the room, when they are asked how happy they are. When the spouse is not present, effing miserable is oh, bloody hell, I went too far. That was the wrong button. Effing miserable was his conclusion. And I'll just scroll down so you can see that he said this. Yes, here it is in this insider article. Now, I already mentioned on Friday, this seemed really weird. This seemed really weird to be a conclusion that he took from the information available, because it says in this article that the information that he got was from the American Time Use Survey. Now, this is a survey that you take over the phone. People from the Bureau, I think it's the Department or Bureau of Labor in America, will phone you up and ask you about different elements of your life, how you're using your time. And for the purposes of this particular survey, he was getting the information from, it was, if I scroll down so that we can see, so it was for his latest book, Happy Ever After, cited evidence from the American Time Use Survey, compared levels of pleasure and unhappiness in unmarried, married, divorced, separated, and widowed individuals. Okay, so this is qualitative data that he took from people self-reporting when they were called over the phone. I thought it was really weird, the idea that they call you over the phone and then they ask you if you can, is your spouse in the room right now? Okay, if they are, I'll take the information, but I'll also take the information if I ask you to shoo them away, at which point the people that you're speaking to over the phone give vastly different information, because if they're in the room with you, you're really happy. If they're not in the room with you, they're really unhappy. This seems like a very strange way of going about taking this survey information. It seems, one, just to be completely counterintuitive to how you would do it. Two, as though it would be sneaky in a way you wouldn't expect from these surveys. And three, what would the purpose of asking these questions this way be in the first place?
I think that if you see how academia operates from the inside, you will see that there's a run for, let's say, bringing money into the department.
Yes.
And this happens from all sorts of, say, sources of finance and sources of income.
You want to be seen as bringing in original data and new data.
There's a lot of state funding of universities and departments, but especially there are some people who want to say that they're making groundbreaking research.
Yes.
And
are more than willing to twist information to do so.
Usually, in order to get money from particular, let's say, funds to make a research, you need a research proposal. In that research proposal, you need to have an idea of sort of what you want to find out. Now, I'm not saying that everyone is completely ideologically driven and they don't change their mind if they see data.
But at the same time, to get to this point, you still need to have basically passed all of the checks to show that you're relatively on side.
There are checks, and if you see at the rapid growth of departments who are basically getting money to say the obvious, or they're getting money in order to make research that has to do with gender studies, all the studies, you'll see that basically there's a lot of bureaucracy going into it. And you could say sometimes a lot of ESG going into it.
I would imagine so as well. But either way, with all of that considered, this all just seemed like really unusual ways to go about collecting information and collecting data, and a very strange interpretation to take from all of this. And it turns out my suspicions were vindicated, because one of our subscribers on the website, a man called Grant Gibson, went into the comments of that and sent me this article. Now, this is from Vox from 2019. I'd just like to say thank you, Grant Gibson, because this was a very illuminating article and very good at clearing up a lot of the issues that I had here, because it turned out all my suspicions were right. This is Vox, who are not a right-wing conspiracy publication, so that immediately says that they're not going to be pushing an agenda in our direction. They're going to be trying to report this from their own perspective.
Depends who you ask. Are they Maoists?
I don't know.
Then they could be seen as.
Perhaps. Either way, it's also from 2019, so I'm very interested to see if they would have changed their perspective on this, seeing as we've had the whole COVID debacle since then, when the experts were propelled even higher in prestige than they were considered already in the late 2010s. But let's read through some of this. So, many books aren't fact-checked, and yet we're increasingly realizing they're full of errors. Okay, very interesting. And it explicitly talks about Mark Dolan's research. Last week, a shocking claim about happiness made the rounds in the press, from The Guardian to Cosmopolitan to Elle and Fox. Women should be wary of marriage, this claim said, because while married women say they're happy, they're lying. According to behavioral scientist Paul Dolan, I said Mark a moment ago, apologies for anyone called Mark Dolan. Paul Dolan, promoting his recently released book, Happy Ever After, said they'll be much happier if they steer clear of marriage and children entirely. Married people, it goes through the quote again, are happier than the population subgroups by only when their spouse is in the room. When they're asked how happy they are when the spouse is not present, effing miserable, Dolan said, citing the American Time Use Survey, a national survey available from the Bureau of Labor Statistics and used for academic research on how Americans live their
Where
lives.
does this lead?
No. Let me just finish this because it's very interesting. Because obviously, he's trying to present some new information with a remarkable conclusion that can be seen as innovative, something you've not seen before. Because generally, you expect people get married, they're happy.
Yeah.
They're happier than they would have been single. He's presenting this new idea that actually they're more miserable. They're not just more miserable, they're effing miserable when they're married together, which promotes this antenatal, anti-family idea, which is very prevalent in our society at the moment, to the point where you'll have people using his words and his data in articles that they then send to other people to inform their worldview and counter people's arguments about why having a family and getting married is a very good thing for society as a whole.
This is ridiculous. Sorry, because even if you accept that that could be the case, even if that still doesn't give you an argument for abolishing the family. You could be making arguments for, improving families. He could be writing books saying, okay, listen, I have some ideas for how you can improve families because families are lacking in A, B, and C. Instead,
well, his solution is, as you would imagine,
what's his solution?
Stay single.
Stay single.
That's the solution.
And not have kids due to antinatalism.
But it gets better. It gets better. Would you like to see how much of a farce this whole exercise is and how badly he misinterpreted the data? Okay. The article continues. The problem that finding is the result of a grievous misunderstanding on Dolan's part of how the American Time Use Survey works. The people conducting the survey, as you would imagine, as I suspected, didn't ask married people how happy they were and then shoo the spouses out of the room and then ask again, because let's be honest, all things taken equal, that would just be strange behavior from a person who's just a voice on the other side of the phone. Dolan had misinterpreted one of the categories in the survey, spouse absent, which refers to married people whose partner is no longer living in their household, as meaning the spouse had stepped out of the room. You are clinically retarded if you read spouse absent and think that the person had asked them to shoot. It means that they are estranged. They're in a marriage where the two people in the marriage are estranged. So obviously, if you're in an unhappy marriage to the point where you're no longer living with one another, obviously they're going to report lower levels of happiness. You imbecile! You absolute moron! And people take this information, they publish it in articles, and then they turn around and use this as a way to attack other people's worldviews on why you should get married and have children and live a fulfilling life, and inform their own worldview on why them going out and getting plastered every weekend and not indulging in anything that would be considered meaningful or long-lasting into the future is a good thing, because some idiot misinterpreted the clearest information possible on this survey. I'm sorry, I've gone a little bit crazy. I'm a bit tired. I'm caffeinated. And this just, when I read this, it blew my mind that he could be so stupid.
I mean, okay, if that's the case, it seems that it's a problem. But, methodology is a tricky thing. I mean, I'm not justifying him, but I think the problem is more to do with value. That, you want to conduct research. You want to conduct research that says that, many women are unhappy in marriage. Why do you want to conduct your research? And what is your, let's say, conclusion? If your conclusion is you shouldn't have marriage, then I think that's, the problem is fundamentally an ethical one and secondarily methodological.
Well, yes.
Because at the end of the day, even if this person has or in the future uses correct methodology, there is the further problem of value, what you want to do with this.
I agree.
I think that's the
But this
most
person
important.
is deemed an expert, and with that, you expect a certain level of technical expertise and competence that would come to justify that label of expert, because people put their trust into experts. And this idiot either willingly misinterpreted it on the value judgment to justify the conclusion he already wanted to come to, as you may suggest, or is so stupid that he misread it and assumed the farcical situation that I presented, that the person over the phone just told him, get your spouse out of the room and then we'll ask again.
No, I didn't suggest anything about the thing, but I said that, methodology is secondary with respect to the value. Why do you want to do research? Because, there are so-called experts, you could say, who could be experts in using correct methodology, but for bad purposes.
I understand. Well, that's the old Mark Twain. There's lies, damn lies, and statistics. If you manipulate statistics and data however you want, you can come to whatever conclusion you already preordained in the first place a priori. Either way, I'll just carry on with this article before my ears start to emit steam. The error was caught by Gray Kimbrough, an economist at American University School of Public Affairs who uses the survey data and realized that Dolan must have gotten it wrong. I've done a lot with time use data, Kimbrough told me. It's a phone survey. The survey didn't even ask if a respondent's spouse was in the room in the first place, because that would be a very strange thing to do. Dolan confirmed all of this to me by email. So he even admits himself that, sorry, it turns out they accidentally added an extra 0 onto my IQ score when I tested for it back in high school. We did indeed misinterpret the variable. Some surveys do code whether people are present for the interview, but in this instance, it refers to present in the household. I have contacted The Guardian, who've amended the piece, and my editor so that we can make the requisite changes to the book. The substance of my argument that marriage is generally better for men than women remains. Using what data? Okay, whatever. But still, there are still plenty of articles floating about, like this one, that have not posted a retraction or amended the information. And this information, because of the fact that he misinterpreted the data so blatantly, is still floating around for people to base their entire bloody worldview on.
Can you, on this link, it seems to me that we are talking about a professor of behavioral science at the London School of Economics. So, yes, again, I think the most important thing here is how considerations about value feature into it, because normally there are, sadly, many people in, let's say, behavioral sciences and in non-ethical disciplines who they just say, okay, the ethics are secondary, we don't care. Or there could be an agenda-driven research. I don't know. Yeah, but
it seems
it's an issue. The problem is how ready people are to throw away completely ethical considerations from research.
It seemed very much to me, reading all of this, that he came in with a preordained conclusion that he wanted to reach, and interpreted the data that he had available to him to reach that conclusion, no matter how stupid that misinterpretation was, willful or not. But this is only the tip of the stupid iceberg. If we've got an entire Titanic of stupidity going around among the so-called halls of expertise that we put all of our faith in these days, because they are our modern churches after all. The article continues, and I won't go on for too much longer, but I just want to highlight a few more that they leave in here. So this is only the most recent example of a visible trend. Books by prestigious and well-regarded researchers go to print with glaring errors, which are only discovered when an expert in the field or someone on Twitter, who, let's be honest, Twitter anons these days tend to be the global experts in whatever it is that you may or may not be researching. They get, and I mean that unironically, most of the best information I find these days is either in old books or Twitter. So thank you for that. Gets a glance at them. In May, author Naomi Wolf learned of a serious mistake in a live on-air interview about her forthcoming book, Outrages, Sex Censorship and the Criminalization of Love. In the book, she argues that men were routinely executed for sodomy in Britain during the 1800s. Now, in the modern progressive era, I imagine that I would have learnt about this in secondary school history, had it been the case. But guess what? It wasn't true, because as the interviewer pointed out, it appears she had misunderstood the phrase death recorded in English legal documents. This is the quality of people we have informing, probably on political policy as well. They can't even interpret simple terms used in old documents to understand what they meant at the time and what they mean in context. She misunderstood the phrase death recorded in English legal documents and thought that it meant that the person had been executed. death recorded. Oh, that means they must have chopped their head off, when it actually meant the death penalty had been deferred for their whole natural life. This meant that the executions that she said had occurred never actually happened, and it took some random interviewer to let her know that. Once again, people base their understanding of the world on these people's claims. Earlier this year, this is back in 2019, remember? Former New York Times editor Jill Abramson's book, Merchants of Truth, this is a very ironic name, was discovered to contain passages copied entirely from other authors and alleged to be full of simple factual errors as well. And around the same time, I, the author of this article, noticed that a statistic in the New York Times Magazine and in Clive Thompson's upcoming book, Coders, was drawn from a study that doesn't actually exist. Fantastic. Fantastic. So they're just making stuff up. Okay, even better. In many respects, we got lucky in the Dolan case. Dolan was using publicly available data, which meant that when Kimbrough doubted his claims, he could look up the original data and check Dolan's work. It's good that this work was done using public data, he said, so I'm able to go and pull the data and look into it and see, oh, this is clearly wrong. Many researchers don't do that. They instead cite their own data and decline to release it so they don't get scooped by other researchers. With proprietary data sets that I couldn't just go look at, I wouldn't have been able to look and see that this was clearly wrong, he ended. So, yeah, best thing to do, in my opinion, if it's a mainstream book being pushed by the mainstream media, then just ignore it because it is most likely 90% completely made up. These are our experts, gentlemen. Do not trust a single one of them, for God's sake. Thank you very much for watching this segment from the podcast Lotus Eaters. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you feel like supporting the work that we do, then you can subscribe to our website for as little as £5 per month to get access to all of the premium work that we do on there, including the most recent book club that I've been part of, Julius Evoler's Fascism Viewed from the Right, where I had a very interesting discussion with Carl. If you'd like to catch up with what I'm doing on a day-to-day basis, you can follow my social medias on Twitter at Harry Lotus Eater and also on Getter at Harry Lotus Eater. Thank you again for watching and take care.